Title: The Devil's Knock at the Door at 3 a.m. If you think your nights are safe, think again. Hit subscribe, like, and comment. This story will make you question every sound after midnight. The house on the outskirts of Willow Creek, Texas, sat under the ghostly glow of a harvest moon. A small, weathered structure surrounded by scrubland and towering oaks, it was the perfect picture of rural solitude. Inside, the Harrison family, John, his wife Emily, and their 2 children were already tucked in for the night, unaware that the hours ahead would stretch the limits of their courage. It started quietly, just after 3 a.m. Emily stirred from a fitful sleep, hearing a single deliberate knock on the front door. At first, she thought it was John, returning from checking the security system or locking the barn. But when she whispered, "Who's there?" silence answered. Her heartbeat quickened. She shook John awake. "Did you hear that?" she asked. John, groggy and irritated, dismissed it. "Probably the wind," he murmured. But when the second knock came harder, sharper, it reverberated through the walls. Both of them froze. It was no wind. This sound had intention. The next few nights followed the same pattern. At 3 a.m., the knocking returned, rhythmic and insistent. Every night, the sound seemed to echo louder than the night before. John tried to check outside, but the yard was empty, bathed in blue-gray moonlight, the trees swaying silently in the wind. No footprints, no sign of life. The children began to wake screaming, reporting glimpses of dark shapes standing beyond their bedroom windows, always motionless, always watching. Emily swore she saw a figure cloaked in black, face obscured, standing in the shadow of the porch light, never moving, yet somehow following the family's gaze. John's skepticism faded with every night. The tension became palpable. The house felt alive, with malice. Doors creaked without reason, floorboards groaned, and the air smelled faintly of sulfur, acrid and unnerving. Even the dog refused to sleep, growling at nothing, ears pinned back in fear. By the 4th night, John and Emily discovered the history of their land. Local legend spoke of witches who cursed the soil centuries ago, claiming that anyone who lived there would be haunted until they appeased the spirits. The Harrisons had dismissed these tales as folklore until now. That night, the knocking changed. It became faster, more urgent, echoing as if pounding from inside the walls rather than the door. Emily peeked through the blinds and gasped. Standing just beyond the glass was a figure shrouded in darkness, taller than any man, completely still, eyes glowing faintly red. Her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't human. John grabbed a flashlight, swinging it toward the figure. Its outline wavered like smoke in the wind, and then it vanished. But the knocking did not stop. It continued relentlessly, as though the entity were summoning something unseen, testing the family's resolve. The children clung to their parents, tears streaking their faces, whispering about voices calling their names from the darkness. The family realized this was no prank, no ordinary haunting. The presence had anchored itself to their home, and every knock was a threat, a ritual of summoning. By the 5th night, the knocks became more violent, shattering the delicate glass of the porch window. John and Emily realized the shadow didn't just knock, it demanded entry. Panic set in. The family huddled together, whispers of prayer mingling with terrified sobs, as the entity's intent grew clearer. The devil himself, using the ancient curse as a gateway to their home. Emily pressed her hand against the children's mouths to stifle screams as the knocking grew deafening. Shaken, by the entire house. Outside, the figure appeared again, its featureless face staring, unmoving yet radiating menace. For the first time, the Harrisons understood the terrifying truth. The devil's ritual had begun, and they might not survive the week if they didn't act quickly. The Harrisons spent the day in tense silence. The sun barely lifted their spirits. Even in daylight, the air felt heavy, oppressive, as if the entity had already invaded every corner of their home. John tried to secure the doors and windows, but no lock, no barricade could stop what was coming. The knowledge of the ancient curse weighed on them like a stone, gnawing at every nerve. By 3 a.m., the first knock arrived soft at first, then louder, insistent, shaking the walls. Emily's breath hitched. The children cowered under the blankets, eyes wide, staring at the front door that now seemed impossibly distant. Then the shadow appeared. It wasn't outside this time. Standing just beyond the hallway light, it was inside the house, semi-transparent yet solid enough to cast an ominous outline against the walls. It moved without making a sound, gliding toward them, eyes glowing faintly red, like embers in the darkness. John grabbed a flashlight, swinging it in wide arcs. The beam caught the figure, or at least the suggestion of it. The air grew icy, their breath formed clouds that lingered unnaturally. Objects began to tremble on tables, picture frames rattling as if the house itself were trembling. Emily whispered a prayer, clutching the children, but the shadow reacted, recoiling slightly, then advancing with more force. The knocking continued, coming from inside the walls, the ceiling, even the floor. It was everywhere at once, a relentless, supernatural percussion that threatened to drive them mad. In a panic, John attempted to escape to the kitchen to grab knives, but the hallway stretched, unnaturally long. Every step felt like moving through a void. The shadows along the walls seemed to twist and reach toward him. The entity was not alone. Faint whispers echoed from the corner's voices calling out the children's names, pleading and taunting simultaneously. Emily realized the shadow was bound to fear. It thrived on their panic. She shouted, demanding it leave, waving her arms. For a moment the darkness flickered, then surged back, denser, more tangible, pressing in from all sides. The family huddled together, forming a barrier, their only defense their courage and will to survive. John remembered something he read in the old local archives. Witches in Willow Creek had used the devil's ritual to bind shadows to living souls, forcing terror as a form of control. The knocks at 3 a.m. were a summoning, a test of vulnerability and faith. Now the family understood. If they faltered, the entity could take physical form, leaving them permanently trapped. Suddenly the lights flickered and went out completely. The shadow surged forward. Elena's youngest child whimpered as the entity hovered inches above them, its outlines stretching toward their faces, radiating cold and dread. A thunderous knock echoed through the walls, shaking the floorboards, and the entity's face became discernible, featureless, black, yet somehow maliciously expressive, promising suffering. Emily and John grasped each other, drawing strength. John pulled a silver crucifix from the mantel, a family heirloom, and held it high. The entity recoiled, letting out a soundless scream that vibrated through their very bones. Dust fell from the ceiling. Furniture slid slightly on its own. The house seemed to writhe, alive with the shadow's power. But the family refused to back down. Emily began to chant prayers aloud, repeating the words John had barely understood from old records about banishing dark spirits tied to witchcraft rituals. The entity convulsed, flickering violently, its form unstable. The knocking slowed, then became erratic, as if the shadow were losing focus, struggling to maintain its hold. By the first light of dawn, the shadow dissipated, leaving the house eerily silent. The air felt warmer, lighter, almost safe. But when John checked the windows, he saw faint scratches along the frame, deep gouges that had not been there before. The children slept fitfully, eyes twitching under their lids, haunted by lingering whispers. Emily whispered to John, her voice trembling, "It's not over. It will come back at 3 a.m. tonight, and every night after, until it's satisfied." The Harrisons had survived the night, but the Devil's Knock was far from finished. And deep in the shadows beyond the front door, a pair of glowing red eyes waited patiently, knowing the next 3 a.m. was only hours away. The clock struck 3 a.m., and the house shivered. The knocking had returned, louder than ever, each rap shaking the walls and rattling the windows. The Harrison family huddled together in the living room, hands intertwined, hearts hammering in unison. Outside, the faint glow of the porch light flickered, and for the first time the shadow fully solidified a black humanoid form, taller than any man, with faint red gleams where its eyes should have been. The children trembled, whispering prayers, and Emily clutched John's arm as the shadow moved silently across the porch. The knocks changed, rhythm irregular, chaotic, as if the devil himself was impatient, testing their fear. The air grew icy, each breath forming clouds that lingered unnaturally. The living room lights flickered violently, casting warped shadows along the walls. John remembered the old diaries he had found in the attic, detailing rituals to banish the evil tied to the cursed land. Clutching a silver crucifix, he shouted prayers aloud, while Emily held the children close. The shadow faltered slightly, the red gleams in its eyes flickering, but it did not retreat. Instead, the knocking intensified, now coming from the walls, ceiling, and floors everywhere at once. Suddenly, objects in the room began to levitate. Chairs tipped, books flew across the floor, and dust spun in ghostly vortices. The family realized the entity could manipulate the physical world, drawing strength from their fear. Emily stepped forward, holding a candle, its flame flickering wildly. The shadow recoiled, momentarily retreating toward the doorway, but its shape stretched and twisted, filling every corner of the room. The children screamed as the shadow reached the center of the room. Its featureless face loomed, radiating cold and malice. John's voice trembled but remained firm as he called out, "You will not have us! Begone!" The shadow wavered, and the knocking became uneven a pause, then a sharp rap that seemed to echo from another dimension. Emily, remembering the warning from the diaries, sprinkled holy water along the threshold of the room. The shadow shrieked in a soundless, vibrating roar that rattled the windows. Its form began to flicker like smoke, breaking apart into thin, twisting streams of darkness. The knocking slowed. The temperature in the room began to rise, and the oppressive weight lifted. Finally, as the first rays of dawn filtered through the curtains, the shadow dispersed completely, leaving only a faint haze and the lingering scent of sulfur. The children collapsed, sobbing in relief. John and Emily embraced them tightly, aware that they had survived, but only barely. Yet, as John approached the front door to check the porch, he noticed faint scratches etched deep into the wood. His pulse quickened. He glanced back toward the living room, and on the phone screen on the table appeared a single message written in letters of shadowy red. "This isn't over." The family shivered. They had survived the devil's summoning for now, but they knew in their hearts that the cursed land, the ritual, and the shadow at 3 a.m. could return, stronger and more determined than before. The devil had made its mark, and the Harrisons would never forget the terrifying nights that had brought him so close to their door. If you thought this story was terrifying, the next one will haunt you even more. Hit subscribe button so you don't miss it.